There are moments in life when the world keeps moving, yet something inside you feels stuck. You wake up, go through your routines, speak to people, even laugh at the right moments, but beneath it all, there is a quiet ache. Not loud enough to demand attention, not dramatic enough to explain to others, but persistent enough to follow you everywhere. This is often what remains after a relationship ends. Not just the loss of a person, but the loss of a version of yourself that existed only in that connection. For many people, the hardest part of moving on is not the breakup itself. It is the feeling that letting go of your ex somehow means letting go of who you were, who you hoped to become, or the future you once imagined so vividly. You may fear that forgetting them means erasing memories that mattered, or denying emotions that were once real. And so you hold on, not always consciously, but through habits, thoughts, and emotional patterns that keep reopening a chapter that has already ended. Moving on without losing yourself begins with understanding this truth. Forgetting your ex does not mean pretending they never existed. It means releasing the role they no longer play in your life. It means allowing the memory to become a memory, instead of a living presence in your daily thoughts. When a relationship ends, your mind does something very human. It looks for explanations, patterns, and meaning. It replays conversations, reimagines different outcomes, and asks questions that have no satisfying answers. This is not weakness. It is your brain trying to regain a sense of control after emotional disruption. Love creates emotional routines. Your nervous system gets used to a certain voice, a certain presence, a certain rhythm of connection. When that disappears, your system doesn't immediately understand that the danger has passed. It simply registers absence. This is why you can miss someone even when you know the relationship was unhealthy. This is why logic alone is never enough to heal a broken attachment. You are not just grieving a person. You are grieving familiarity, identity, and emotional safety as you once defined it. One of the most painful mistakes people make during this phase is turning the breakup into a judgment of their worth. You start to believe that being left means being insufficient, that not being chosen means not being enough. Slowly, without realizing it, you allow the end of the relationship to rewrite your self-image. You become smaller inside. You second-guess your instincts. You hesitate where you once trusted yourself. This is where losing yourself truly begins. Not when the relationship ends, but when you hand over your sense of value to the outcome of that relationship. To move on without losing yourself, you must separate the story of the relationship from the story of who you are. A relationship is an experience, not a definition. It can shape you, teach you, and affect you deeply, but it is not the final verdict on your identity. There is a subtle trap that keeps many people emotionally tied to their ex for far longer than necessary. It is the belief that holding on equals loyalty, depth, or emotional strength. You may tell yourself that because you love deeply, you must grieve deeply, endlessly. But depth of feeling does not require permanent suffering. Love was real, and because it was real, it deserves a respectful ending, not a lifetime sentence. Another trap is idealization. After a breakup, the mind often edits reality. It highlights the good moments, softens the pain, and quietly removes the reasons the relationship ended. This mental editing is comforting at first, but dangerous over time. You begin to miss a version of the person that no longer exists, or perhaps never existed consistently. You miss moments, not the whole truth. Letting go requires honesty. Not brutal self-attack, but gentle truth. Truth about what the relationship gave you, and truth about what it cost you. Truth about how you showed up, and truth about what you tolerated. Growth begins when nostalgia stops being selective. Moving on is not an act of force. You cannot command your heart to stop feeling. But you can guide your attention. Where your attention goes, your emotional energy follows. Each time you replay old memories, check their social media, or imagine alternative endings, you strengthen a neural pathway that keeps the bond alive. Each time you gently redirect your focus back to your present life, you weaken it. This redirection is not suppression. Suppression says, don't feel. Redirection says, I feel, but I choose not to live here. There is a profound difference. You will have moments when memories surface unexpectedly. A song, a place, a smell, a phrase. When this happens, the goal is not to push the memory away or drown it in distraction. The goal is to acknowledge it without attachment. Let it pass through you like a wave. Feel it rise, feel it peak, and allow it to fall without building a story around it. Stories are where pain stays alive. The moment you add meaning, interpretation, or self-blame, the emotion gains weight. Without the story, emotions move much faster than you think. Another crucial part of moving on without losing yourself is reclaiming your inner authority. During relationships, especially intense ones, we often outsource parts of our emotional regulation. Their approval becomes soothing. Their presence becomes grounding. When they leave, you may feel unanchored, as if your emotional center was taken with them. This is not because you are incapable. It is because you temporarily forgot how to self-soothe, self-validate, and self-direct. These skills return when practiced. Begin by noticing how often you seek imaginary conversations with your ex in your mind. You explain yourself. You argue. You seek closure that never arrives. Each of these conversations keeps them psychologically present. Closure is not something another person gives you. It is something you decide when you stop asking questions that require their participation. Closure comes when you say, I understand enough to move forward. Not everything, but enough. You also move forward by rebuilding your identity outside of romantic attachment. Who are you when no one is choosing you, watching you, or defining you? What values matter to you when you are alone with your thoughts? What parts of yourself went quiet during the relationship? Often, after a breakup, people rush to replace the person, thinking a new connection will heal the old wound. But if you haven't reconnected with yourself, you risk carrying unresolved patterns into a new dynamic. Moving on is not about finding someone new to distract you from the pain. It is about becoming someone who no longer needs the pain to feel connected. Loneliness during this phase is not a sign of failure. It is a transition space. A pause between identities. If you resist it, it grows heavier. If you sit with it, it becomes instructive. It shows you where you abandoned yourself, where you compromised your needs, and where you are ready to grow. There will come a moment, quiet and almost unnoticeable, when you realize you haven't thought about them for hours. Then days. Then weeks. Not because you forced forgetting, but because your life expanded again. Your nervous system learned a new rhythm. Your mind found new reference points. Your heart made space for peace. Forgetting your ex does not erase the love you once felt. It integrates it. It turns it into wisdom instead of longing. It allows you to carry the lesson without carrying the weight. You do not lose yourself by moving on. You lose yourself by staying emotionally loyal to a chapter that no longer exists. Growth requires release. Healing requires courage. And forgetting, in this sense, is not betrayal. It is self-respect. As you continue forward, remind yourself that you are not behind. You are not broken. You are not weak for still feeling. You are in the process of becoming emotionally whole again. And wholeness does not come from being chosen by someone else. It comes from choosing yourself, consistently, quietly, and without apology. One day, you will look back at this period not with pain, but with clarity. You will see how the ending redirected you. How it taught you boundaries, self-awareness, and emotional independence. And you will realize that moving on did not cost you yourself at all. It gave you back. And as you move deeper into this process, something subtle begins to change. The pain no longer feels sharp. It becomes quieter, more reflective. You start to notice that what you miss is not always the person themselves, but the way you felt when you believed the future was secure. The sense of direction. The illusion of certainty. The comfort of being emotionally anchored to a shared story. This is an important realization, because it shifts the focus from them back to you. When relationships end, they often take clarity with them. You suddenly find yourself questioning decisions you once made with confidence. You wonder if you trusted too easily, or not enough. You replay moments when you ignored your intuition, and moments when you doubted yourself unnecessarily. This self-examination can either become a path to wisdom or a trap of self-criticism. The difference lies in how you interpret it. Self-reflection is healthy when it leads to understanding. It becomes harmful when it turns into punishment. You are not meant to relive the relationship to prove that you suffered enough. You are meant to extract meaning and then release the rest. Pain that is not processed becomes identity. Pain that is understood becomes guidance. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is redefining what moving on actually means. Many people think moving on requires emotional numbness or indifference. They wait for the day they feel absolutely nothing. But emotional maturity does not erase feeling. It changes your relationship to it. You may still remember. You may still feel a brief ache. But it no longer controls your behavior, your self-worth, or your vision of the future. Moving on is when your life no longer revolves around the absence of someone else. At some point, you may notice guilt creeping in. Guilt for laughing again. Guilt for enjoying moments without them. Guilt for imagining a future where they are no longer relevant. This guilt is not about morality. It is about attachment. Part of you believes that staying sad is a form of respect, or proof that what you shared mattered. But your healing does not invalidate the past. Joy is not betrayal. Peace is not disloyalty. The relationship mattered because it shaped you, not because it must continue to hurt you. As you reclaim your emotional independence, you may also confront a deeper fear, the fear of starting over. When you invest time, love, and vulnerability into someone, it can feel as though leaving means wasting everything you gave. This fear keeps people emotionally stuck long after the relationship has ended. But nothing that taught you something true about yourself was wasted. You learned how deeply you can love. You learned what you need to feel safe. You learned what you cannot accept again. These lessons stay with you. They do not disappear just because the relationship ended. Another quiet challenge during this phase is identity recalibration. When you are with someone for a long time, your sense of self subtly adapts. Your routines change. Your preferences shift. Your future plans intertwine. When the relationship ends, you are not just alone. You are undefined. This can feel frightening, but it is also a rare opportunity. You get to rediscover who you are without negotiation. Without compromise. Without performing a version of yourself that fits someone else's expectations. This is not about becoming selfish or closed off. It is about becoming rooted. Ask yourself, gently and without pressure, what brings me calm? What restores my energy? What do I believe about love now that I didn't understand before? These questions are not meant to be answered quickly. They are meant to be lived into. There will be days when you feel strong and clear, and days when the past feels closer than you expected. Healing is not linear. It does not move forward in a straight line. It expands and contracts. It tests you, not to punish you, but to strengthen your emotional resilience. On difficult days, avoid the temptation to romanticize regression. Missing someone does not mean you should return to what hurt you. Emotional memory is persuasive, but it is not always accurate. Respect the version of yourself who chose to walk away, even if that version was tired, confused, or afraid. That version of you was protecting something important. As time passes, you may encounter moments of comparison. You see couples, hear love stories, or imagine your ex moving on. Comparison can reopen wounds if you allow it to define your timeline. There is no universal schedule for healing. Your pace is not a failure. It is personal. The goal is not to replace the relationship as quickly as possible. The goal is to rebuild yourself so thoroughly that your next connection is a choice, not a need. Eventually, you may notice a quiet confidence returning. Not the loud confidence of distraction or bravado, but a grounded sense of self-trust. You begin to rely on your own emotional steadiness. You no longer reach outward for validation in the same way. You feel less urgency to explain your pain to others. This is growth. You start to understand that love is not meant to consume you. It is meant to complement a life that already has meaning. When love becomes the sole source of identity, its loss feels like erasure. When love is integrated into a full, grounded sense of self, its ending becomes survivable. And then, one day, something remarkable happens. You realize that your ex no longer represents loss. They represent a chapter. Closed, but significant. You can acknowledge what was good without denying what was wrong. You can appreciate what you learned without wishing to return. This is emotional maturity. This is healing. Forgetting, in this context, does not mean deleting memory. It means releasing emotional dependency. It means allowing your past to inform you, not define you. It means trusting that the person you are becoming does not require the validation of someone who could not stay. As you move forward, carry this truth with you: you are not moving on because the relationship failed. You are moving on because you refuse to fail yourself. You are choosing clarity over confusion. Growth over attachment. Peace over familiarity. And in doing so, you are not losing yourself. You are returning to yourself. As you continue forward, you may begin to notice something that once felt impossible: your thoughts slowly create more space between them and the past. The mind no longer rushes back automatically. The emotional reflex weakens. And in that space, a quieter awareness begins to form. You start to sense yourself again, not as someone recovering from loss, but as someone standing on their own ground. This phase often brings a deeper layer of healing, one that has little to do with your ex and everything to do with your relationship with yourself. For many people, heartbreak exposes an old pattern that existed long before the relationship began. A pattern of overgiving. Of self-abandonment disguised as love. Of believing that being needed is the same as being valued. When the relationship ends, these patterns are suddenly visible, no longer hidden behind romantic intention. This can feel uncomfortable, even confronting. But awareness is not punishment. It is permission to grow. You may realize that you stayed quiet when something felt wrong, that you compromised your boundaries to preserve connection, or that you measured your worth by how much you could endure. These realizations are not meant to shame you. They are meant to free you. You did the best you could with the awareness you had at the time. Now, your awareness is expanding. True moving on begins when you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me about how I relate, attach, and choose?" This shift is subtle, but powerful. It moves you out of victimhood and into agency. Agency does not mean blaming yourself for the outcome. It means recognizing that you have influence over your future patterns. You may not control who stays or leaves, but you do control how you show up, what you tolerate, and how you respond when something no longer aligns with your values. One of the most misunderstood aspects of healing is emotional detachment. Many people fear detachment because they confuse it with emotional coldness. But healthy detachment is not about shutting down your heart. It is about unhooking your sense of self from outcomes you cannot control. Detachment allows you to feel deeply without being consumed. It allows you to love without losing yourself. It allows you to walk away when necessary without collapsing. As you practice this, you may find that your emotional reactions soften. You still care, but you care from a place of inner stability rather than emotional dependency. You begin to trust that you can survive loss, disappointment, and uncertainty without falling apart. This trust in yourself is one of the most valuable outcomes of heartbreak. There is also a quiet grief that surfaces during this stage. Not grief for the person, but grief for the time you spent trying to make something work that was not aligned. Grief for the version of yourself that stayed longer than necessary. Grief for the energy you poured into something that could not meet you where you were. Allow this grief. It is not regret. It is release. Grief honors what was given, without demanding it be returned. As you let go, your inner world begins to reorganize. You may find yourself drawn to solitude in a new way. Not the isolating solitude of pain, but the restorative solitude of self-connection. You become more selective with your energy. You listen more closely to your intuition. You no longer rush to fill emotional gaps with noise, attention, or distraction. This is not withdrawal. This is discernment. During this time, it is important to rebuild trust in yourself. Trust that you can make decisions without second-guessing every outcome. Trust that your feelings are valid, even when they are uncomfortable. Trust that you do not need external permission to choose what is best for you. You rebuild trust through small acts of consistency. By keeping promises to yourself. By honoring your boundaries even when it feels inconvenient. By choosing rest when you are tired, honesty when it is uncomfortable, and patience when you feel pressured to rush ahead. Slowly, these choices form a new inner foundation. You may also notice that your definition of love begins to change. Love no longer feels like intensity alone. It feels like safety. Mutual effort. Emotional presence. Alignment of values. You stop chasing chemistry without compatibility. You stop romanticizing emotional chaos. This shift is one of the clearest signs that you are no longer operating from old wounds. At some point, the question of future relationships may arise. Not with urgency, but with curiosity. You may wonder if you are ready, or if you will ever love the same way again. The truth is, you will not love the same way again. You will love more wisely. Your heart will still open, but it will open with discernment. You will not abandon yourself for connection. You will not confuse intensity with intimacy. You will not tolerate inconsistency in the name of potential. This does not make you guarded. It makes you grounded. When you meet someone new, you will bring a fuller version of yourself into the connection. Someone who knows how to stand alone. Someone who chooses partnership, not dependency. Someone who understands that love should expand your life, not consume it. And if there comes a moment when the past tries to resurface, when memory knocks unexpectedly, you will meet it differently. Without panic. Without longing. Without self-doubt. You will acknowledge it, thank it for what it taught you, and let it pass. Because you are no longer living in that chapter. You are writing a new one, informed by experience, guided by clarity, and anchored in self-respect. Forgetting your ex, in the deepest sense, is not about erasing them from your memory. It is about removing them from your emotional center. It is about reclaiming your inner world as your own. And once you do that, you realize something quietly powerful. You were never incomplete without them. You were simply learning how to come home to yourself. As you settle into this new sense of self, there is often a period of stillness that follows. It can feel unfamiliar, even unsettling. The emotional highs and lows that once defined your days have softened. The inner drama quiets down. And in that quiet, you may wonder who you are without the emotional intensity that once filled so much space. This moment is important. It is the threshold between surviving heartbreak and truly transforming through it. When pain recedes, it leaves behind a vacuum. For a long time, your thoughts, feelings, and reactions may have revolved around loss, meaning, and longing. When those patterns dissolve, the mind looks for something to replace them. This is where many people rush forward too quickly, filling the space with new attachments, distractions, or external validation. But the quiet is not empty. It is fertile. Stillness is where self-trust takes root. It is where your nervous system recalibrates. It is where you learn to exist without performing, proving, or pursuing emotional reassurance. Sitting in this space allows your identity to stabilize without being defined by someone else's presence or absence. During this phase, you may begin to notice how much of your energy was once spent anticipating, interpreting, and reacting. Waiting for messages. Reading between lines. Adjusting yourself to maintain connection. Without that constant emotional negotiation, your mind feels lighter. Your body feels less tense. Your attention becomes more available to your own life. This is not accidental. It is the result of emotional detachment becoming emotional freedom. You start to make decisions based on alignment rather than fear. You say no without over-explaining. You say yes because it feels right, not because you want to be chosen. You become less reactive and more responsive. This inner shift changes how you move through the world. You listen differently. You speak more honestly. You notice red flags without justifying them away. You also recognize green flags with clarity rather than suspicion. One of the most profound changes that occurs during this stage is your relationship with time. When you were emotionally attached to the past, time felt heavy. Days dragged. Nights felt long. The future felt distant or uncertain. As you reclaim yourself, time regains its natural rhythm. You become present again. Presence is not the absence of memory. It is the absence of emotional captivity. You are no longer mentally rehearsing conversations that will never happen. You are no longer preparing explanations for someone who no longer needs to understand you. Your mental energy returns to the present moment, where your actual life is happening. With this return comes a deeper sense of self-respect. Not the loud, defensive kind, but the quiet kind that does not need to announce itself. You respect your feelings enough to honor them, and you respect yourself enough not to be ruled by them. This is where discipline quietly enters the picture. Not discipline as punishment or rigidity, but discipline as devotion to your well-being. You begin to care for your inner world with intention. You protect your peace. You choose routines that support clarity rather than chaos. Discipline becomes the bridge between who you were and who you are becoming. You may notice that your standards evolve. You no longer tolerate emotional inconsistency, ambiguity, or lack of effort. Not because you are demanding, but because you know the cost of settling. You have felt the weight of loving without reciprocity, and you are no longer willing to pay that price. This does not make you closed-hearted. It makes you conscious. At times, fear may resurface. Fear of vulnerability. Fear of repeating the past. Fear of being hurt again. This fear is natural. It is not a sign that you are unhealed. It is a sign that you are aware. The difference now is that fear no longer controls your choices. You do not let it convince you to stay small, closed, or disconnected. You acknowledge it, learn from it, and move forward anyway, at your own pace. Reopening your heart does not mean exposing it without discernment. It means allowing connection while staying anchored in yourself. It means remembering that you can love deeply without disappearing. And if love does not work out again, you trust yourself to survive it. Not because you expect failure, but because you know your resilience. This trust changes everything. You stop clinging to potential and start choosing reality. You stop romanticizing effort that is not matched. You stop chasing emotional highs and start valuing emotional safety. Love becomes a shared experience, not a self-sacrifice. Eventually, the memory of your ex loses its emotional charge entirely. It becomes neutral. You can think of them without contraction. Without longing. Without resentment. This neutrality is not indifference. It is completion. Completion means the experience has been integrated. It no longer asks anything of you. And when you reach this point, you understand something deeply important: moving on was never about them. It was about you remembering who you are when you are not orbiting someone else's approval, attention, or affection. You are someone who can feel deeply and recover fully. Someone who can love without losing themselves. Someone who can walk away from what no longer aligns, without bitterness. This is the quiet power that heartbreak, when processed with awareness, gives you. As you stand here now, more grounded, more self-aware, more emotionally whole, carry this final truth with you. You do not need to forget the past to move forward. You need to release its authority over your present. And once you do, life opens again. Not all at once, not dramatically, but steadily and sincerely. With clarity. With purpose. With a deeper connection to yourself than you may have ever known. You are not starting over. You are starting from wisdom.